We spend so much time focused on the big levers of health, diet, exercise, but what about the more subtle signals our bodies send?
Hmm.
Today, we're diving deep into something you might not have fully appreciated: symmetry and body shape.
Yeah,
Get ready for some surprising insights into how what we see in the mirror reflects our inner well being.
that's right. Our physical form, it really does offer clues about our health. And look, discussing appearance can be delicate, I know,
Sure.
but the connections between how we're built and, well, how healthy we are, they're just too significant to ignore.
Right.
The material we're exploring today, it ranges from patterns in nature to this historical fascination with proportion and even modern studies linking body types to health outcomes.
Okay, let's get into it then. Our mission on this deep dive is to really understand why symmetry and body shape matter for our health, and maybe more importantly, to extract some practical steps we can take based on what we found.
Quite.
Let's start with maybe a fundamental concept: this inherent link between symmetry and health we see all over the natural world.
What's fascinating here is just how consistent this link is. It's not just about looking balanced.
Hmm.
Asymmetry in nature often flags underlying problems. Like
Yeah.
think of a leaf that's not symmetrical or an insect with an uneven wing.
Right, right.
These can signal environmental stress or developmental issues.
Hmm.
The key insight really is that this consistent pattern likely reflects these fundamental biological principles of healthy development.
And this isn't a new idea, is it? I was struck by how, well, almost obsessed ancient civilizations were with symmetry. The Greeks, for instance.
Oh, absolutely.
They weren't just admiring statues, they were deeply studying mathematical proportions as like a marker of health.
Precisely. They believed ideal physical proportions were intrinsically tied to well-being. And this interest in mathematical ratios, it wasn't just confined to philosophy and art.
Uh-huh.
The Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio, that specific mathematical ratio that pops up everywhere in nature and art,
Hmm.
kind of representing ideal proportions,
Yeah, I've heard of that.
both have roots in observing natural forms.
Right. And that work by Dr. Mark Art with the mask of the golden ratio, it's amazing how often that geometric ideal aligns with faces we find attractive.
It is.
It almost feels like our brains are, I don't know, wired to recognize and appreciate that balance.
Yeah.
So the fact that this mathematical ideal shows up in both, beautiful art and apparently healthy faces, that seems like a powerful insight into how our brains might work.
And mathematical biology is actually helping us understand why these patterns exist.
Okay.
It suggests that fundamental initial conditions, like our DNA, sort of set the stage for these recurring patterns in nature.
I see.
So the link between symmetry and health in humans isn't random.
Mm.
It's likely a visible outcome of healthy development and stable biological processes.
Okay, so from the natural world to us, let's talk about overall body shape. I was surprised, actually, to learn about studies connecting common female body shapes to how long and healthily they live. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, what's interesting there is that research has suggested women with what's typically called an hourglass figure tend to experience longer and healthier lives.
Hmm.
Now, this doesn't mean other body shapes are unhealthy, not at all.
Right.
But it implies that how body fat is distributed, which contributes to these different shapes, can have implications for long-term health.
And it's not just about longevity, is it? There's also this fascinating link between male symmetry and, well, let's just say romantic outcomes.
Indeed. Studies have indicated that women report more orgasms with men who have greater facial and body symmetry.
Really?
And this held true regardless of the man's experience level. It points to symmetry as a potential biological marker of mate quality, perhaps signaling good genes and stable development.
That's definitely something. But on a more serious note, there's also a connection between less symmetry in men and some less positive health outcomes, right?
Yes, unfortunately. Research has correlated lower levels of symmetry in men with a higher likelihood of experiencing anxiety, depression, and even gastrointestinal problems.
Wow.
This suggests that developmental stability, as reflected in symmetry, might also be linked to mental and physiological resilience.
And there was even some evidence, though, described as low quality, linking less symmetry to aggression. That's quite a spectrum of effects.
It is. The suggestion there is that less symmetry might be associated with a heightened sensitivity to perceived threats, but it's important to stress the preliminary nature of that specific finding.
Okay.
But overall, the research definitely underscores the wide-ranging implications of symmetry.
It really does. Now, shifting gears just a bit, the idea that form follows function really hit home when we looked at body shape in professional sports. Can you give us some examples of how our bodies are shaped for specific activities?
Absolutely. Think about a basketball player.
Okay,
They're typically narrow chest and incredibly long arms. That offers a clear advantage for reaching and shooting, right?
makes sense.
Conversely, elite swimmers often have shorter legs and these very broad backs, a physique that optimizes their ability to move through the water efficiently.
Ah,
These are clear illustrations of how our body structure can be specifically adapted for peak performance in different disciplines.
yeah.
So beyond just general health markers, our body shape can also be incredibly optimized for specific functions.
It makes perfect sense when you see those extreme examples. But okay, for those of us who aren't pro athletes, is there anything we can actually do if we feel like we're maybe on the less symmetrical side? Is asymmetry like a permanent state?
Not at all. And that's the empowering thing to realize. Asymmetry isn't necessarily fixed. There are many ways we can work to restore bodily symmetry, and by doing so, potentially improve our health.
Okay, good. So, what are some of these actionable steps? Our sources mention things like body alignment exercises, changes in tongue posture, even dietary
Yeah.
changes. Let's dig into those.
Okay, well, body alignment exercises are a fantastic starting point. When our bodies are misaligned, think of that, forward head postures so many of us get from looking at screens. Yeah, me too. It can lead to various issues, from arthrosis, which is basically joint degeneration, particularly in the neck, the cervical spine, to
Ouch.
compressed nerves. Simple exercises can help realign us and relieve that pressure. Changes in tongue posture, which we'll definitely talk more about later, are also vital for facial development and overall alignment.
Okay.
And yes, diet plays a surprisingly significant role,
Ooh.
which brings us neatly to the work of Dr. Price.
Ah, yes, Dr. Price back in the 1930s. He spent years studying the diets and physical development of various non-westernized populations. What did he discover about why some of us develop more symmetrical features than others?
What's really fascinating is that Dr. Price observed that populations sticking to traditional non-westernized diets, like the Maori, Inuit, South American natives who eat nutrient-rich, often tougher foods.
Tougher
Yeah,
foods.
foods that require more chewing.
Mm.
They tended to develop wider faces, correctly positioned jaws, broader dental arches, and naturally straight teeth. Their facial development was more horizontal. The key insight here is just how quickly and severely physical health and symmetry declined when processed foods were introduced. It shows how sensitive our development really is to nutrition.
So, what changed when things like westernized flour and sugar were introduced? It sounds like the impact was pretty significant.
Oh, it was dramatic.
Right.
Within just a single generation of adopting these softer, more processed foods, these populations started experiencing a surge in respiratory allergies, irregular dental arches, cavities problems that were previously really uncommon for them.
Wow, one generation.
Yeah. This dietary shift also seemed to contribute to mouth breathing and a more downward rather than forward growth of the facial structure.
It's incredible to think a change in diet could have such a profound effect on physical development so quickly. And our source mentioned that some of these traditional cultures had specific preconception and pregnancy diets that seemed to contribute to more symmetrical infants. That's really interesting.
It really highlights the critical role of nutrition during those key developmental windows. And this leads us right into the role of specific nutrients, particularly the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K in the development of symmetry.
Okay, vitamins. We all know they're important. But how do they specifically tie into facial symmetry? That connection wasn't immediately obvious to me.
Well, what's fascinating is the intricate way these vitamins work at a cellular level during development. For instance, animal studies have shown that vitamin K2 deficiency during pregnancy can lead to changes in the facial structure of the offspring.
Okay.
In humans, it turns out K2-dependent proteins are concentrated in the nasal septum, and they help guide the growth of the face forward and laterally, outwards.
Right.
If there's not enough K2, it can lead to premature fusion of the maxillary bones. Those are the bones forming your upper jaw, which hinders proper facial development. And that, as we know, is central to facial symmetry.
So vitamin K2 is crucial for actually building that underlying facial structure correctly. And it works together with vitamin D3, right? You mentioned that earlier.
Exactly. Vitamins K2 and D3 work synergistically in bone remodeling. They're like a team. And this aligns perfectly with Dr. Price's observations about the impact of deficiencies in vitamins A, D, E, and K on facial development and the likelihood of asymmetry, especially during pregnancy and early childhood.
And it's not just about bone, is it? Vitamin A, for example, you said it has a much wider role than just skin and vision.
Absolutely. Vitamin A influences the expression of our genetic phenotype, basically, how our genes manifest physically. Not enough vitamin A can lead to a less optimal expression of our inherited traits during development.
Hmm.
Vitamin E, on the other hand, plays a key role in tissue repair and the body's ability to sort of change shape as it grows. And crucially, all these vitamins contribute to a healthy gut microbiome and a robust immune system.
Okay, how does that connect?
Well, a healthy immune system can reduce respiratory allergies, which in turn promotes nasal breathing. And nasal breathing is absolutely vital for proper facial development rather than mouth breathing.
Ah, I see the connection now. So, if these vitamins are so key for symmetry, what kind of diet should we be aiming for to make sure we're getting enough of them?
Well, the source material really emphasizes a diet based on real, unprocessed foods. Think grass-fed meat, and especially organ meats like liver,
Liver, okay.
wild-caught fish and other seafood, pasture-raised eggs, and fermented foods like certain yogurts or beverages.
Right.
For oils, things like unkeyed olive oil, coconut oil, and maybe palm oil for cooking are mentioned. Then you have organic vegetables and fruits,
Yeah.
soaked or sprouted legumes, soaked nuts.
Why soaked?
Soaking helps reduce anti-nutrients and makes them easier to digest, also including natural salts, spices, and animal fats.
That sounds very similar to some of those ancestral diets Dr. Price studied. It's kind of about getting back to basics, isn't it?
Precisely. It's not about a rigid prescription, really, but about ensuring we're getting those essential nutrients for proper development and maintaining symmetry. It also means avoiding inflammatory stuff and anything that hinders our digestive or respiratory function.
Makes sense.
And interestingly, those tougher, fiber-rich carbohydrates in traditional diets, they likely contributed to better lateral jaw development simply because they required more chewing.
More work for the jaw.
Okay.
So, we've covered diet and development, but our source also highlighted two specific body parts as being crucial for overall symmetry, not just facial. The feet and the mouth. Let's start with the feet. I wouldn't immediately think of them as being that central to overall balance.
It's kind of surprising, right? But think about it. The foundation of our body, our feet, supports our entire weight.
True.
If that support is uneven, it can have this cascading effect up the kinetic chain that's the interconnected system of muscles and joints.
Okay.
Restrictive footwear, especially things like high heels, can dramatically alter how our weight is distributed.
Yeah.
And that potentially leads to increased asymmetry and future joint problems down the line.
Ah, high heels.
Yeah.
The eternal dilemma of fashion versus potential long-term health issues. So what can we actually do to improve foot alignment and symmetry?
Well, first step, which might seem a bit unusual in our shoe-obsessed culture, is simply to spend more time barefoot.
Really? Just barefoot?
Yeah, it allows our feet to move naturally and sort of regain their intended form and strength.
Mm.
Also pay attention to how you walk. If your toes tend to point outward,
Uh-huh.
it could indicate alignment issues further up, maybe in your knees or hips. Choosing footwear that allows your feet to move naturally and has minimal heel elevation is also key.
So flatter shoes, wider toe box, maybe?
Exactly. And if you get the chance, walking on sand is apparently great for strengthening the muscles in your feet and legs.
Those all sound like relatively simple changes we could make. And our source suggested a self-assessment using a full-body photo. That's a good practical idea to actually see any obvious imbalances.
Absolutely. Looking for things like, is one shoulder higher than the other? Are your knees or hips aligned? It can be quite revealing.
Yeah.
And the good news is there are tons of online resources now with alignment exercises for specific areas if you find something problematic.
Okay.
Now, let's move on to the mouth, which our source argues is potentially even more critical than the feet for facial symmetry. That surprised me too.
Me too. Why is our dental occlusion, like how our teeth come together, so vital for symmetry?
Okay, think about the sheer weight of your head. It's over 4 kilograms, right?
Wow, yeah.
It relies on proper support from our cervical spine, the neck bones, and the mandible, which is your lower jaw, and the hyoid bone in your neck.
Okay.
If the transmission of that weight fails because of incorrect jaw alignment, our head tends to naturally shift forward.
The forward head posture again.
Exactly. And this can lead to vertical facial development, issues with the cervical vertebrae and the atlas, that very top vertebra, a backward positioning of the mandible, and a downward movement of the maxilla, the upper jaw.
That sounds like a whole chain reaction of misalignment. And this all starts with incorrect dental occlusion and you mentioned improper tongue posture.
Precisely. When our teeth don't meet correctly, and our tongue isn't resting gently against the roof of the mouth. Proper tongue posture means the tongue rests lightly up there, kind of guiding facial growth.
Okay.
It disrupts this crucial support system. This malocclusion, or bad bite, can lead to a huge range of facial asymmetries that are often really complex to correct, much more so than just with orthodontics.
Why more complex?
Because the body develops compensatory mechanisms over time, like that forward head posture we keep mentioning, sometimes just to achieve any tooth contact, even if it's not ideal.
It's fascinating how interconnected it all is. And our source mentioned various techniques like MUing, AFP, BioBlock, things that aim to realign the facial structure and bite. But it sounds like there's a lot more to facial symmetry than just getting straight teeth.
Exactly. While those techniques might be helpful for some, the foundation, as we've discussed throughout, really comes back to basics. Diet, that real tough, nutrient-rich food, proper tongue posture, correct swallowing mechanics, consistent nasal breathing, and even healthy foot development.
Right.
These aren't, quick fixes just for attractiveness. They're real strategies for long-term health, and improved symmetry often develops naturally as a byproduct of that health.
This has been a truly eye-opening deep dive. So just to recap, symmetry and body shape aren't just about aesthetics, are they? They're deeply linked to our health, influenced by this fascinating array of factors from the food we eat as we grow to our posture, even how our feet function.
Yeah,
And it's all based on the information we've explored from our sources today.
that's right. It's a much more holistic view where our physical form really reflects our overall well-being. And the good news is many of these contributing factors are actually within our ability to influence.
So as you go about your day, maybe take a moment to consider one aspect of your own body alignment or perhaps your dietary habits that we've discussed. Could making even a small adjustment have a broader impact on your overall health and well-being down the line? This is really just the beginning of understanding this fascinating connection, and we'd encourage you to think more about these ideas and how they might apply to your own health journey.